Welcome to L&D Disrupt, the podcast dedicated to helping you overcome workplace challenges and prepare for the future of work today. I'm your host, Nelson Sivalingam, and I'll be speaking with the movers, shakers, and path breakers in L&D who are reshaping their organizations right now. Join us each week as we delve into the highs and lows of work in the industry to get to the real nitty-gritty stuff that you actually care about. Would you bother delivering a learning experience to employees if you knew it would have absolutely no impact? I can bet your answer to that question is a no. But how many of us in L&D are actually taking the time to ensure our initiatives will deliver impact before rolling them out? Today we're joined by Emma Lloyd, Experience Director at Create the Ripple, to cover the essential components you need to create impactful learning experiences that truly make a difference. Emma, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you so much. It's great. I'm really excited to explore learning a little bit more this morning.
Me too. And especially one of my favorite topics. This is we're going to talk about, I guess, building impactful learning. And just so people listening are not thinking, is this a buzzword? Impactful learning is just another one of those. I wanted to start off with, why is it important? Why should not just L&D people, but why should organizations care about impactful learning?
Oh, it's so important. I think that particularly after everything over the last few years and different hybrid ways of working, there's a real lens on learning now. And I am passionate about supporting us to realize the benefit that learning should be relatable, it should be relevant for today and also to prepare for tomorrow. So to get really impactful learning, we need to tap into the learner's cognitive short-term and long-term. And there's a real skill in design to be able to do that, but also it takes time and effort. These things don't just happen at the click of a finger.
Yeah. I was going to say, there's straight away, I want to dive into this kind of cognitive short-term and long-term, but I want to backtrack a bit to understand, okay, what are the risks when you don't have the kind of impactful learning in place? Right? What are the risks?
There are real risks, and the main risk being, I think, if you can see lots of recent studies, one of the latest ones for McKinsey, that 75% of managers who were surveyed said that they were dissatisfied with the training experiences. So the risk is that we put all of this effort into doing something, but it doesn't have that stickiness. People don't retain the knowledge. There isn't a change of behavior. But for me, it's much more than that. We are missing an opportunity where gone are the days where you have that slide with these are your specific objectives for today. If we think broader, if we think of it as an experience, there are so many layers where we're able to support not just a learner's personal and professional development, but I'm going to be very bold to say every bottom line metrics available as well. But it takes that time and thought to make sure that we're doing the right learning experience.
So let's go back to that short-term memory and kind of long-term. How do you design for that, right? Because often what we find is we're drawn to designing for engagement because, whatever said and done, engagement is that first primary requirement for any learning to happen, but that's not where we stop. And that's often where we find the challenge is we stop at the first hurdle of, as long as we've got them engaged and we're getting the completion rate, that's all that matters. But like you said, that isn't all that matters. So how do you start to design beyond engagement for impact?
I saw a great quote the other day, just in a book that literally by chance this weekend I was reading called The Art of Gatherings by Priya Parker. And one of the bits I love in it, which says 90% of that preparation to arrange a really great gathering, a connection with learning, happens before an event. So I think, again, being really mindful that we can't do these sort of mass sheep dip approaches and expect them to be impactful if we're not going to put in that effort up front. And for me, the experience starts the moment that someone engages with an invite, with a learning platform. Yes, the engagement of a session, whether that's virtual or online, but also it's that aftercare as well, because I've always been brought up, don't tell me you care, show me you care. And the more that we're able to focus on all of these elements of the experience, we create that short-term engagement where we can anchor the experience and remember it was a great time. But we're seeing that longer-term benefit where we're going to get that knowledge translating into behavioral change.
And I guess that starts with knowing what behavior change you want in the first place, right? So in terms of defining what good impact looks like. So how can we, taking it further back, how can we start with the right intentions of the impact we want to drive?
Yeah, and I think you're absolutely right, which goes back to probably the point I made earlier, which is, and I realize the conundrum, which is not being so specific that we're not able to get the broader benefits, but not being so broad that we're not able to ensure that there is a specific focus as well. And it is a constant sort of balance with that equilibrium, so that when we're doing that learning needs analysis, we're understanding what are we wanting these individuals to do today, now, to be able to do something that they feel, I can get this. This has been relevant and relatable, whilst also ensuring that we're designing for that stretch for tomorrow and beyond as well. And if I had a magic formula, and when I get one, there's a book or two read, I think, but it is that constant balance. And I think it is, it's like the constant balance between not filling that time too much, that temptation, particularly face to face, when you've only got X amount of time with someone, the temptation to really make the most of it without giving it the space to allow people to think, to share, to learn, to laugh, to feel, to experience is all critical as part of the design.
What's an effective way of understanding the learning needs? You mentioned kind of learning needs analysis, but how does that kind of manifest itself?
I think there's an opportunity wherever possible to really immerse yourself. So if I was a consultant going in, so you're not there living and breathing it, to be able to go in, to have the opportunity through focus forums, not just necessarily a list of people that have been asked, to really get a sense of what that focus is for the organisation, whilst also, I was just thinking, as I was talking there, with a recent programme, having access to latest employee engagement surveys, having access from a strategy, looking at the branding voice as well. And all of these things, I think, really help you to immerse, to make something that is going to not just feel but sound like something that an organisation is going to buy into as well. And that's different every time. And even when we might have some tried and tested concepts that we will use, it's how we actually wrap that up in an organisational language and purpose to really help that stickiness.
And when you're looking at that kind of quantitative and qualitative data, Emma, what kind of things are you looking out for? Because, you know, sometimes, especially if you're not familiar with using a lot of data on a day-to-day basis to design your learning experiences, it can sometimes be overwhelming. And so, you know, where do you start? What are the things to look out for when you're gathering this quantitative and qualitative data?
So the starting point I always do is, rather than doing the gap needs analysis, I do the strengths. What are the strengths of this organisation? What do they do well? What are the people saying that they love about something? And really looking for that strength that then fuels that opportunity to look at from a gap needs analysis. And I know compared to maybe many colleagues, that's the opposite. And I feel we're missing a trick, because there was a great study done by a change organisation, a really quite substantial one, that said those organisations that focused on strengths are 6 times more likely to help to support behavioural change. So let's know what we're doing really well. Let's know what's important to us. And then let's use that to look at, so where are the areas of focus? Where are maybe some of those gaps that we really want to help to support ourselves to move up? But we're doing so from a position of strength, rather than when sometimes people come in and think, oh no, I've just got to do more. Quite often that doing more might be more focused on the stuff that we do really well.
Right. So getting better at what you already do fairly well. And so you've gathered the data, you find out where the gaps are. Now you need to convert this into a learning experience that's actually going to change behavior. Where do you start?
I know, and this is like the magic bit, because you can imagine, I've got my little office here, but I have piles of paper and books and games and activities, and it's trying to not let my excitement and passion get away with me too much. I use a process around leaning in. So whenever using a design, it is, how am I getting the learners to lean in? And that may well be, depending on whether it's a virtual experience, a face-to-face, whether it's self-service, that amount of time will vary.
Right.
But we should be creating a design that means I am interacting with the learning. So whether that is maybe watching a video, maybe that's using chat function, maybe that's a breakout session, it's continually thinking around that interaction. And as a rule of thumb, with any program that I'm doing, whether that is the face-to-face or virtual world, that leaning in needs to happen within the first 10 minutes. It's not about us, maybe as a facilitator or even as a provider of learning. It's what can we do to create that learner to almost immediately go, this feels different. And as mentioned, that's not just with the workshop interaction, that's also the pre-bit. So what's the first bit of information that the individual will get, whether it's an invite, whether it's just the wording on a learning platform? If we make more focus to really help that to be enticing, to be stretching, to start to challenge and disrupt thought, we're more likely to create that buy-in from an early stage.
It's quite a paradigm shift from the days of kind of face-to-face and virtual sessions where it's almost just to vomit knowledge at people, right? It's very one-sided, and you're not really leveraging the opportunity to interact. And so it could have just been a one-sided video, but instead you've blocked out 5 hours of people's time just to talk at them. And that seems to be a shift that some organizations still struggle with, right? We saw in the last couple of years where with the pandemic, when people couldn't do face-to-face training, they essentially just recreated what they would do in a classroom, but virtually, and realized how exhausting it is for people to just sit there listening to someone for kind of multiple hours. And so how do you bring about that shift where you're thinking about kind of interaction design and challenging people and really leveraging as much as you can from that synchronous interaction?
Yeah, and it's so true. I think we worked really hard. If we go back to sort of the 2019, 2020, when overnight it was the organization that I was consultant for at the time, it was like, we need to really move quickly here. Otherwise, everything's being rescheduled. And it was one of those situations, which is, I know we can find a way of doing this. Trust us, we'll find it. And I'm really proud to say that we didn't lose anything during that switchover period. In fact, we grew the business. And my thoughts around why that happened is we were really focused on the experience. It isn't always an opportunity, but I will say there was a couple of thousand packs that were sent out. I had my my children there. I was paying 10p a pack to help me build them up during lockdown. It was really important that I wanted to create that experience of walking into a training room that has been set up really well, because that's the other thing. I think whether it's face-to-face or virtual, it's taking that time for what's that first impression, so that people had some little goodies, they had secret envelopes to open. And if you're not able to do that, even in a virtual environment, certain surprises along the way that almost help people to go, this feels so different. And it was only last week, I did 2 8-hour all-day virtual workshops, and people say, you can't do 8 hours via Zoom. And yet these individuals at the end were saying, that felt as though I was in the classroom. It went so quickly, because if you focus on creating the space to enable the learning rather than just the content, well, that's half the battle, because creating the space for people to share, to listen, to learn, to laugh, to have some fun, then if that's the focus, then you are more likely to create design enable that leaning in. And there's so much out there, whether it's virtual activities, whether it's virtual decks of cards, virtual handouts. There are so many things you can do. It takes time, it takes effort and resource. But I'd go back to the point I made earlier, which is, if such a high proportion of people are feeling dissatisfied with learning, it's not whether we've got the time to invest in this. It's, well, no, we haven't got a choice. We need to. And if you always do what you've always done, you're going to get left behind.
Yeah. And what are some of the examples, Emma, of kind of surprises and things you've kind of added to create that memorable experience?
Yeah, so as I say, I'm thinking of one of the packs in particular. So, of course, there's some sweets and nourishment. You can't have a workshop without sweets and nourishment.
Yeah.
But being quite clever with them. So, whether it's flumps or boost bars or retro things, little goodies in there that make people feel, we've had, I was trying to look here, we've sent people pause buttons. So little squidgy pause buttons when we've been talking about the importance of slowing down. Right. We've had envelopes with activities so that rather than knowing what's coming up, actually there's an envelope and you send people off into a breakout. They have no idea. And It could be a scavenger hunt, or it could be a challenge to work through. And even though you may say, well, it's the same as showing a slide, it's so different because it's the physicality of I'm opening something up. Or even if you don't have the resource available to be posting stuff out, which I acknowledge may not be always the case, and depending on scalability, you can still arrange secret emails for certain breakout groups to be open so that they have a part of a challenge and another group have another part of a challenge. And it's anything there that helps people to feel that they're part of that learning tribe, that experience, the shared experience. And again, some great providers for virtual activities. I use RSVP a lot. They've got colorblind. They've got different things which enable people to use different platforms that allow the learning to come to life. So I get quite excited about it.
I was going to say, I'm getting excited listening to this, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners are too. But I guess the next question would be, this sounds amazing. I want to be able to do exactly what you're saying, but does it take a lot more time and effort? So when you compare, I'm sure everyone can agree this is no longer a choice, right? If you're investing in learning experiences that are not engaging and not driving impact, then they're a waste of resources anyway. And so if you're going to invest it, get it right. But how long does it take? So when you're putting together these experiences, how much time does it take?
So in all honesty, I think some of it's going to be down to experience. So now that actually having had the opportunity of, the more that you do something, people will sometimes say, Emma, like a machine, because I'm used to doing that now. What I would say, though, is I usually with design will work to the ratio of 3:1, and it is no different whether it is 3:1, what I'm going to say, what we used to do, or 3:1 now. And yet actually what we do now, it's less about input and more around creating the experience. So Once you've done that the first couple of times, that you've got that sort of process in place of how we're going to lean in. But once you've educated learners, because learners initially are a little bit like, I thought I was just going to sit here and listen and multitask, but you actually do something. So there's lots of elements there where you have to tentatively warm people up into it, because we want them to feel that learning is something they're choosing to do rather than it being done to them. And I would say start small, in the sense of doing something rather than nothing, and just thinking a little bit more cleverly around. So Mentimeter, Menti I use, I know some people use Slido or otherwise, having the chat function, having breakouts, and really thinking about the flow around the interactivity as a first point of call, and then layer it with the content. It means that we're putting the experience at the heart of it, that then allows the platform for the content on top, rather than, this is the content we need to do. What should we do? So it's almost as though it's doing the same thing, but it's reversing it. And I'd, again, be so bold. The more you're doing it, the design is actually easier, because it's not reliant on me having to have all of the answers and the whole thing set up. It's creating an experience that is much richer and broader from an outcome perspective.
And so you do this, you get an engaging learning experience, people feedback saying it is memorable, it's one of a kind. Then how do you then pursue that further to ensure that it's driving impact?
Yeah, so the immediate point, so I'm very pre and post emails are really important to me, and whether that's emails, comms, or whatever platform is being used as well. So it's tapping into it. Now, again, it's a very quick win to do, but I will always do screenshots of any experience and create brief collages. So you're sending people not just an email, which is this is what we've learned, but a little bit of an inside joke, a photo of the experience, a couple of maybe get abstract summaries of there, a couple of reference points. So we're tapping into, we've got that energy, we've got that buzz. What can we do immediately? We set up a number of different focus groups afterwards. We encourage active learning sets where just 15 minutes every couple of weeks that you regroup. And again, it's helping to support to create learning habits. I also think we have a responsibility that as learning providers, we're not just doing these one-off workshops, that there's a narrative, that there's a flow, that there's a story, so people understand how it fits in as well. So, for example, the workshops I've just been talking about, we do recaps 6 months down the line as well to say, do you remember that learning? And again, people will often say, oh, it was good, but I got busy. That's okay. And it's being brave enough to say we are supporting individuals to move from being told this is what you learn and when you learn to creating a catalyst of an experience that encourage them to take on more self-learning when they're back in the workplace as well. So it's almost developing the skill of learning. And to do that, we need that constant embedding as well.
The idea of focus groups sounds interesting. So what would the format there be? You would invite back people who have been to one of your sessions. And how would that play out?
Yeah, and so lots of different ways. It can depend on whether it is to really gather just from a feedback perspective, and it's like a stop point and saying, okay, so this is where we are now, particularly with programs. If it's a year-long program, we don't do the design up front. We do the design for the first part of it, and then we see, are we on track? Do we need to change course as well? So that allows us to make sure that we're constantly relevant and relatable as well. The action learning groups are an opportunity, again, just to create a space. Doesn't necessarily need to be led by the learning facilitator or consultant. Sometimes it's the role modeling to begin with, where we're getting people together to say, so what's worked for you? What's gone really well? What's been more challenging? To also to support that active peer learning as well. So as I said before, it's almost looking for ways to help to support individuals to keep the learning going on, and recognizing we all like to learn in different ways. So again, trying to provide different interventions, whether it's through a focus group or a coaching session, because they, again, 30 minutes sort of one-to-one coaching sessions to help to embed the learning, whether it's sending something in the post out of the blue where people go, oh my gosh, this has reminded me. I'm a big fan of sort of A5 cards, which are quite tangible, again, that you can prop up on your desk. And everybody likes to receive something in the post.
I love the idea of, even for a longer term program, it's taking more of an iterative approach, right? You're doing that first focus group to get the feedback. And like you said, that might change the direction of what you're doing. You might realize it's not having the desired impact. And often that happens way too late in the process, right? People wait for months before they realize everything we've done in the last 6 months has literally had no positive impact. And how do you think L&D professionals can bring that habit into how they approach learning experiences? Really that kind of iterative approach of collecting feedback and changing as they go along?
I guess you took the words sort of out of my mouth there, which is it's the feedback culture. We talk so much about having a feedback culture, and I think we need to put the lens on ourselves to be really open to understanding that sometimes if something hasn't worked quite well, there are so many reasons why that might be. So let's be bold enough to find out early on, to be brave enough to sometimes keep going with something, because sometimes there is that intuition of like, okay, just a little bit longer, or sometimes having that courage to say, actually, that approach and tone didn't quite land this time. What can we do to move forward? So it is almost creating that art of feedback culture. And for me, being really explicit from the outset. So when I'm engaging with an organization or a company, that openness is right from the beginning. I want us to sing and dance about the stuff that works well. I want to know when there's the successes. I want to know when things haven't quite landed, because it could also be, it's not that it doesn't work. Maybe we didn't position it quite right. Maybe we didn't have the activity to bring it to life. So the more that we can do that early on, then we can continually improve. And particularly for programs, if learners know their feedback is being acted on, again, it's that leaning in. It's the leaning in to help to create the experience, which I think goes sort of full circle, which is let's worry less around from a content, more around the experience. And then the content, whatever it is, will come to life if we've got that experience right from the outset.
And I guess kind of building on the impact part, Emma, and really going on to talk about return on investment. And generally, L&D have struggled to kind of demonstrate return on investment. A lot of the conversation we have with L&D professionals, but in particular, they find it harder for what's considered, I guess, quote unquote, soft skills, is where they find it even harder. And I know you've looked at things around, key values like kindness and gratitude. And we often speak about the importance of these, yet from an L&D perspective, we struggle to demonstrate the ROI of these behaviors. How would you suggest L&D can approach that and show that there is ROI for these behaviors?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I'd start by saying that it's more difficult to measure. It doesn't mean it can't be measured. And just because something isn't black and white, we sometimes have that quantification bias that Lencioni talks about, which is can't measure it, can't do it. Whereas, again, I think the broader we are to recognize that there are a number of things that will be influenced by supporting development of these skills. And as you said, and I'm pleased you put it in quote, soft skills makes me go, because I think even sometimes, people say core skills. I call them human skills. These are the skills that are going to support the humans of your business to operate in the most effective manner. And we're very fortunate now. There is a huge body of research to say kindness, gratitude. These aren't just those sort of nice to haves. There was a superb book, Leading with Gratitude by Elton Gostick, that came out year before last. Right. It was an employee study of 1 million people, and they found that the single greatest influencer on employee engagement was gratitude.
Wow.
So for me, it's about us to translate gratitude into, as they've done in their book, principles of leadership. So when we say the word kindness, well, what does that mean? What are we actually looking at? And when you peel back that umbrella, actually it's acting with integrity, for example, and people go, oh, that's one of our values, and go, okay, so it's values-driven behavior. And we're starting to actually really use these umbrella terms, but understand what it means on an individual basis. It was the American coach Bob Curry who said unexpected kindness is the most powerful, least utilized, and yet least costly form of human change. There's so much research there now to say that if we can create an environment that is based on some of these innate human skills, we are able to find a direct link into performance, productivity, effectiveness, whatever bottom line metric you're looking for. It's for us to join the dots, though. And that goes back to that narrative to understand actually what do we mean by kindness in our organization, and how will that help us to make the deliverables, and then joining those dots. So it isn't always a straight sort of line through, but the dotted lines are there. And just because it's more challenging doesn't mean we should take it off the table.
Completely agree, Emma. A couple more questions before we go to the quick fire. It's clear from what you're saying, the learning experience isn't just what happens during the event or the session. It's often what you do before and after plays such an important part. So What do you think an organization can do to support the before and after? Because that's often the areas that are overlooked, and so much effort goes into just planning those, hours that you're in the classroom for. What can companies do to support the before and after?
So if it's something like a program, it's probably a little easier to say that, to really celebrate a launch, to be able to get that advocacy from maybe an individual within the exec team, board, or otherwise, whatever the setup is, well, and to really think around the linguistics so that the welcome email that might come out from an HR department is very much aligned and almost curated with whoever's done the design. In fact, I'm just about to support with a new program, and the comms is part of my role as a learning professional to help it to sort of embed as well. Micro videos are wonderful. So again, rather than just telling someone and it's sort of bypassing a 90-second video to give a little bit of a flavor or a teaser, or maybe that secret envelope to say something's coming and you don't know what, that just creates that heightened curiosity of, okay, what's this? The packs I'm a big fan of for programs, and somebody opened it last week and it was a brilliant example of, they went, I'm so excited. And it was wonderful to see that what are we doing to create that excitement? We can be really excited behind the scenes because we've been working on something and we know there's some learning magic coming up. I think we sometimes just forget to loop in the learners. And the expectation is, come along, you're going to have a great time. But don't tell them, show them that as well. So whether that's through a SharePoint, whether it's little flash reminders, whether it's a personalized email, if there is the opportunity to pop something in the post, something that says, get excited, but also it shows I'm committed, we're committed, we're looking for your commitment as well. So something up there that allows people to almost start to give some of their cognitive thought into whatever the learning experience is. And likewise, that continues afterwards as well.
And it sounds like a big part of your learning experiences, Emma, are kind of the social and collaborative element, right? Like you said, it's not just all on the facilitator or the instructor. It's actually you're facilitating for people to interact and learn from each other during those experiences. How can you go about creating an environment where people can form those connections, especially when you're doing it virtually?
Yeah, and it's always one of those things where it's an art. So I'm continually learning every time where I think, oh, that worked well, or oh, I wouldn't do that next time. It is about building trust. It's that age old of sharing some vulnerability, showing some humanness. I think what's really important as well is giving something up front that makes people go, oh, that's good. That's useful. I've already learned something. We're only 30 minutes in. So that first 20, 30 minutes of a workshop and engagement, whether it's online, virtual, face-to-face, is critical because it's that learner's opportunity to say, I'm deciding whether I'm going to show up or actually I'm just going to be a passenger. Right. Humor is a big part. I think actually laughter and fun. I'm a great believer, as the proverb says, what we learn in pleasure, we don't forget. So there's a lot of work in being really present and getting people talking. So if it is a virtual environment, within 10 minutes, they're in a breakout, almost whirlwind, where they're thinking, oh, I haven't got time to think. So there's some sort of activity or thinking or sharing. So we get them talking, because what you're doing is you're setting the platform to say, this isn't about me. This is about you. This is around your experience. Also about getting some of those challenges. So whilst I am insanely positive, I'm also really pragmatic. So on the table from the outset, it's sharing with people. We want to look at new ways of working. We know there's some real challenges here as well. And we do quite a lot of connection where we say these two things, again, within the first 30 minutes, that people go, we're not sugarcoating stuff here. Yeah. We want to make it work. So it feels real, a bit of vulnerability, a little bit of fun, always a big dose of kindness, seems to set the scene pretty well.
Are you ready for the quickfire round, Emma?
Oh my gosh, I'll go for it.
How do you learn?
Well, how do I learn? I am very curious. I read a lot. I like to share. I watch stuff. Importantly, I listen. I think my learning has increased more recently through the listening. When we listen, we learn.
What do you love the most about your job?
Oh my gosh, there's so much, can't you tell? I love being a catalyst to make a difference for others. So whether that is to support change, realizing potential, to be that individual that sometimes you get a message 7 years later to say that moment then, oh my gosh, that makes everything worthwhile.
Incredible. How do you like to start your day?
I go for a walk every morning, 6 a.m. So I walk, I talk a lot to myself as well. So it's walking and talking.
If you could change one thing about L&D, what would it be?
I think we've just, it would be the focus to move away from a focus on output and move to outcome. So what's the value we're adding, to think broader without losing some of those objectives. I really feel that we're missing a trick. Learning can be the heart of an organization.
Completely agree. I mean, L&D could have that seat at the table if we were more outcome focused. What's your best productivity hack?
I'm smiling. People know lists. I write lists. I mean, just beyond belief, I'm a list person. However, to help to support others, in case you're not a list, when I'm looking at, for example, experience, I chunk it down. I have time in my diary for thinking, time for design, time for research, time for this. So all of those elements, I chunk it down, and then I have a paper list. And if I don't have my paper list, I'm like, oh, I can't do it. But that's how I fit more into the day, is planning all the different elements.
And that's a to-do list, like in a notebook, on Post-its. How do you track it? Nice.
Literally. Yeah. It literally is. So I have everything on Outlook, but I have a paper, for those that I realize podcast-wise, you couldn't see it, but you could hear the flap of paper. I think it helps me to retain what I need to do as well. So the last thing I do at night is I write everything that I'm going to do for the day, the next day. And that allows, sometimes there's a couple of things, but it always is the night before I plan for the next day.
What's the one thing you know now that you wish you knew at the start of your career?
What's the one thing that I know now? It's okay to be yourself. It was Scott Stratton who said, if you're your authentic self, you'll have no competition. And I think it probably took me a little bit of time to realize that my success is because I'm myself and I'm encouraging others to be themselves as well. So being yourself works, and it's a lot less energy.
What's the one book you'd recommend to someone in L&D or HR?
Oh, I can't recommend one book. Can I have two?
Yeah, go on. You can have two.
So the book I'm reading, I've almost just finished, is How to Begin by Michael Stanier, his latest book. It is phenomenal about doing stuff that matters. However, based on what we've spoken about, I already signposted it. Leading with Gratitude is a fabulous book, because I think it's the first book that I felt is really practical and evidence-based around kindness and gratitude.
What's the one thing you've recently changed your mind about?
Oh, I changed my mind actually this year quite a lot. So I've come into 2022. I spent so much time helping others to believe they're enough, and 2022 was to believe in my own enoughness. And I've really had that mantra throughout January and February. I'm still working on it, but it allows me to be a little bit bolder, to be a bit more courageous, and to let things go, which then feed into changing my mind. Whereas previously I may have made different decisions. So whilst it's broad, it's impacting a lot of my decision making at the moment.
And the last one for you today, Emma, is, what are you most proud of?
What am I most proud of? I suppose I'm meant to say children here. Oh, sorry. Love my children to bits. There's parenting skill. Create the Ripple is the organization I have, but it's the reputation associated. And actually, it's a reputation that is built on kindness and passion for learning and to be inspiring. And I'm really proud to be able to use that to then help others. And given it's something that is born just from me being me, then that's actually something that I have a really big pride in.
I love the name as well, Create the Ripple. Thank you very much, Emma, for creating a ripple today.
Thank you so much.
I love Emma's approach to creating lasting learning experiences, and the energy she brings to learning is just so infectious. If you want to connect with Emma or myself, then our details are below. And if you enjoyed this episode, then please do share it with your colleagues to help spread the word. See you next time.